is not supposed to go back to its vomit. That is a popular African saying. So what are you doing, or what advice can you give to the voters so that this doesn't happen in Nigeria?
Well, first of all, it's not an African saying. It's
a popular saying.
Yeah. It's not. It's and it's a very vulgar term, really, if I may say so. I mean, I'm not saying because really I don't know what it means. Does that then mean that people shouldn't change their minds? People shouldn't make choices? I'm trying to understand the essence.
There was a reason why people back then, like you said, probably the youth might not know, vomited off Buhari.
Absolutely.
From power.
You're absolutely right. I mean, let me make the comparison. I understand where you're coming from now. But before I answer that, if I may say so, I would never object to anybody changing their mind about anything if it's based on conviction. Because generally in our context, particularly in Nigeria now, if anybody says, well, I've changed my mind, I want to say, oh, you know, dog should not go back to its vomit. And they haven't fully appreciated that, look, people can change their minds, ought to change their minds based on superior knowledge or based on conviction. So there's nothing wrong with changing your mind. But if you're saying that in the context of, you know, that we mustn't go back to the draconian days of military rule, or we shouldn't allow somebody who has so demeaned our country and cowered our people and subjected our people to so much evil over the years, and God has removed him from power, and God has stopped them from coming back to power, that we shouldn't go back to such people. I agree with you 100%. And let me make a comparison. It's like, for example, in Zimbabwe, where you come from, or let's say South Africa, you know, today somebody starts talking about, you know, Ian Smith, who once said that no black, I mean, he said this in 1960 something or mid-70s, that no black person would ever rule Rhodesia, as it then was, until you know, the year 2000. Okay, it's like, it would be like saying, well, let today in Zimbabwe, let's forget about the ruling party or the majority rule, and let's talk about voting for Ian Smith or Ian Smith's son or whatever it is, and bring back, you know, all those, you know, obviously offensive views that people like Ian Smith and the white minority rule espoused. Now, that it would be unacceptable, and that would be going back to the vomit, because that really was vomit, and a very unpleasant type of vomit as well. Same thing in South Africa. You know, it would be like saying that today ANC is in power in South Africa, then a party now rises up, the opposition now says, we want to field a candidate that you know, like Vosta, for example, from the old nationalist party that espoused apartheid and believed passionately in it, and all it believed, that would be going back to its vomit. That is the sort of thing these people are saying here. Yes, Buhari is vomit, as far as I'm sorry to say this. And by the way, I have nothing personal against him. I actually admire his military record as a soldier in terms of his ability to fight on the war front. But I believe that he should have remained as a soldier and not become or try to become an elected president. So that would be going back to vomit. In the South African context, if you go back to an apartheid presidential candidate or presidency, that is going back to vomit, and it's a negation of everything your people have fought for over the last how many years since apartheid was overthrown and since white minority rule was thrown out in Zimbabwe. It would be like an abuse of that, an insult. And all those that lost their lives, that were incarcerated, that were driven into exile, that suffered over all those years, you'd be telling them you did all that work for absolutely nothing. That is what it would be like if Buhari was elected in power. All our heroes that died fighting military rule, all those that spoke against it, that were locked up, that were tortured, that were beaten, that were driven into exile, it would be like saying, well, you did it for nothing and your sacrifice means nothing. And we will never do that in this country. So by God's grace, we will not allow our people to go back to their vomit.
Wow. All right, we're just about to round off, but before we do that, let's look beyond the swearing in on May 29, 2015 and positively assume that His Excellency President Goodluck Jonathan will assume his office for his second term. What advice would you give the president?
Well, what I'll probably tell him, first of all, I would advise him to strongly remain close to God, to be focused on what we believe are the PDP philosophies, the PDP manifesto and agenda, and to continue his quest to ensure that Nigeria goes from strength to strength, one in democracy, and evolves a modern-day secular state where religious intolerance has no place, where civil liberties are guaranteed, where the rule of law is maintained, and where our people are allowed to flourish and to bring out the very best potentials in our people. You know, this is what we would ask him to do. And at the same time, we would ask him to cultivate the courage and to maintain the courage to fight Boko Haram. We're a nation at war. And we need to support our president and encourage him not to relent in that fight. I mean, many have described me as a hardliner when it comes to the issue of Boko Haram and Islamic fundamentalism. I'm very proud to be a hardliner when it comes to such matters. And those of us that are hardliners in this respect will be firmly with and behind President Goodluck Jonathan within his government, or at least assisting him in whichever way he sees fit, to ensure that he fights Boko Haram and that we crush these people and that we send them back to hell where they came from. We would encourage him to do that, and most important of all, we would ask him to continue praying, to remain close to God, and never to forget the God that enabled him to win this election, because it was only by the power of God that he would have done so.
Well, thank you so much, Chief. But any last words that you'd want to give to the viewers, especially on the forthcoming elections? Well,
the only thing I'd like to say, or the last thing I'd like to say, is that, look, this is a moment for us in Nigeria, and it's a critical moment. It's a serious moment. We're battling for the future of our nation and for the soul of our nation. It's a question of whether we move forward into the 21st century or whether we go back to the 6th century AD in terms of our outlook to life. Do we want women to be as well-dressed as you are without having to conform to the norms that some believe they ought to be forced to conform to? Women's liberation. Do women have a role to play in our society? Should children or young girls be subjected to early marriage? Should we have child brides? I mean, these are the sort of things that we are resisting. We are saying we want a modern state, the Nigeria that we all believe in, that we all were born into. We want to revisit that. We want to move our country forward. And of course, the only way you can do that is to support the PDP and support President Goodluck Jonathan. The other side have the opposite to offer and nothing else. The dark ages, the suppression of women, the encouragement of child brides and early marriage, and all the baggage that comes with that, you know, and of course the repression of civil liberties and the lack of ability to absorb plurality of views. We don't want that in this country. We want to move forward. We want our youth to have a good future, to be like youth everywhere else in the world, and not a restrictive, repressive society where dissent has no place. That's what APC has to offer. We don't want that. And we urge every Nigerian, every friend of Nigeria, to support Goodluck Jonathan and to support the PDP in the coming elections.
Thank you so much, Chief, and I hope they will vote wisely.
Thank you very much.
And remove sentiments when
Thank
they
you
go
very
to the
much.
polls. Thank you very much. There you go, Africa. I've been speaking to the former Minister of Aviation here in the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He's also the Director General of the Presidential Media Campaign of the PDP. He is Chief Femi Fani-Kayode. When you click into Africa, this is what you get. Send in your emails to clickafrica@brainmesa.com. I'm Josie Mahachi, signing.